Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Phillips DeLucas, and I am the director here at the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. Today we're going to be going through our State of the Neighborhoods report, and functionally what this presentation is an opportunity to share some high-level findings from our annual vital signs report.
I thought someone had joined our meeting that wasn't supposed to be
And
there.
um, just as everyone comes in, if you can put your mute on and stay on mute, that would be very appreciated. However, we normally have a very lively Q&A at the end of this, so we hope that you will stay for the Q&A and be able to sort of talk and discuss. So today, here's an outline of where we're going. We're going to do the introduction to BNIA-JFI, who we are, what we do, what the vital signs report is. For longtime fans, this might be a bit repetitive, but I always think it's a good idea to go back to basics and sort of talk through who we are as an organization and where we're going. Then we're going to talk through some of what's new in the Vital Signs 24 report, and then go into trends by topic area. Now, I'll say this up front. We are not going to go into each and every topic area in Vital Signs. This year, we're only going to touch on 5 of our 8. That doesn't mean that there isn't great information in those remaining 3. I just wanted to balance time with content today and make sure that we had time for a robust Q&A. And then we are going to end with the question and answer period, which is a time for discussion. Also, please ask your questions in the chat as we are going along. Quick answers, Cheryl and our team can provide by text, and if they're more kind of robust, we will bring them up as we get to the end. So first things first, I want to introduce you all to our absolutely fabulous staff here at BNIA. We have a new face this year, which is so exciting. So first we have Cheryl Knott. Cheryl is our assistant director, and you've already seen her on screen today. She supports our vital signs work and also works as sort of the technological officer of BNIA and is a mapping expert. We also just earlier this year hired Desi Neiman onto our staff. They come to us not from Baltimore, but from out of state. They are a recent grad and bringing with them a ton of skills in R, in GIS, and they've just been a fabulous introduction to the team. I hope you get to know them more tomorrow at Baltimore Data Day, but a new face. We also have Zoe Rubenstein, who's been with us now approaching 2 years, who has been the data acquisition manager for our evaluations supporting the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, ARPA evaluations. And then we have Warner Brockman, who is title is Research Support Specialist, however, is a sort of qualitative research whiz. Now he's supporting us doing interviews, transcribing, coding those interviews, and is just sort of excelling into the qualitative research field. This team is producing fabulous work right now, and I am just so proud of them. And I would not be able to do this presentation today without the work that they put into Vital Signs and all of our other projects. So just wanted to really acknowledge them and introduce you to such the fabulous team that I have here. So, who is BNIA? BNIA, we are considered a one-stop shop for comprehensive data indicators and training. And what that means is we look at both multiple topic areas. We have about 8 thematic topics that we look at our indicators in, and then we look at longitudinal data. So that means we have a data repository of over now 24 years, so I need to update the numbers on this, of data about Baltimore and its communities. You'll notice that we are approaching a big 25th anniversary, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the slide. Our mission is to provide accessible, reliable, and actionable data and indicators about, for, and with Baltimore City and its community. We are not also not the only organization who does this work. We are a part of a partnership called the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership, which is located at the Urban Institute. That is a group of over 30 cities who are focused on data democratization and who do similar work to what BNIA does. So if you are doing work that's outside the city or you're looking for maybe some comparative work, this is the group to reach out to and chat with. We have really strong partners across the US who are doing exciting projects with local data and their communities. Now, I sometimes feel like it's a good idea to go back to basics and actually talk about what an indicator is. Um, we collect a lot of data to produce indicators. However, indicators are constructed. We make them. And so the sort of formal definition that we use when we talk about indicators is that they are a measure or a set of measures that help to quantify or express progress towards a goal or an outcome. I also like the wonkier definition, which is why I keep it up on the screen, which is that indicators are a knowledge technology that can be used to quantify, compare, and rank virtually any complex field of human affairs. I really like that second definition because it's active and because it ascribes us, BNIA, as the agents of the people who are creating the measures, who are actively thinking about the best way to interpret the data that we have and report it out to communities in Baltimore City. I like the agency it ascribes, and I feel like it makes us very responsible in uh, promoting and using indicators moving forward. But what can indicators do? They are both individual statistics that, when combined, provide a picture of what's happening in a community. And so they can tell you how many people in your community are working, what the median household income is, how many folks own home. They sort of give you a picture of what's active in your community. They can also be tracked over time. So the number of green spaces increasing or are they decreasing? Are more or less students graduating from high school at any given time? Um, the way that we do our indicators and we update them every year, they give you that longitudinal perspective so that you can really get that sort of year by year, what way are the numbers going, and give you a sense of whether there is time or opportunity to intervene, perhaps. And then, sort of finally, they're used for goal setting and tracking progress. And BNIA really emerged, I think, primarily from sort of a planning background. How can we empower communities to use data to set goals about where they want to go moving forward? So while you can use data and indicators to like evaluate to understand whether a particular program had a particular effect over a long period of time, we can also understand communities can use it to sort of set a particular goal. I want to see vacancies decrease in my community by X% over a set period of time. And that gives that sort of, we are able to provide the tools where communities can use those numbers to track progress moving forward. We pull data from a number of sources. And we have this word cloud here where the larger the word is, the more it is represented in the vital signs repository. So the big ones that we use are city schools, the census, the American Community Survey, Baltimore Police Department, that's BPD, and our crime data, and then Info USA, which is data about businesses. That's one of the data sets that we purchase in order to create indicators. But then you'll see some other fun ones up there. We have Tree Baltimore to track tree planting initiatives, Walk Score to sort of understand how walkable different communities are. The U Vermont one, which people always ask about, is tree canopy cover, and that one is due for an update sometime soon. But you see, we try to pull from a lot of different sources, and by having all those different sources, we're able to get a comprehensive picture of what's going on, but also maybe double checking some things when one data source doesn't quite look right. And so we have this broad picture of data that we use and also a lot of relationships that we build and sustain in order to acquire this data. I think it's worth acknowledging data acquisition and transfer is a very social process. In many cases, it's not an automated transfer. It's us talking to people, asking them what's available, understand them at sort of understanding how we're using it, that there's a real social process to the acquisition of data that happens behind the scenes. And then finally, and I think that this is probably the most important part of what we do, it's how we measure neighborhoods in Baltimore City. So BNIA has a custom geography called a community statistical area. We have 55 of those. Now, Baltimore is a big city and it's a city of neighborhoods. There are far more than 55 neighborhoods in Baltimore City. However, one of the original goals of the Vital Signs Project was to understand and be able to compare neighborhoods amongst one another. And that's really hard to do with neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods are really, really small, no more than a few dozen people, and some are really, really large. And you can't really compare apples to oranges. So what the community statistical area does is it lumps census tracts together and creates what we call sort of an approximation of neighborhood conditions so that we can understand trends in relationship to one another. Um, all of our CSAs, the building blocks of them are census tracts. Um, and so neighborhood lines don't always correspond with either CSAs or census tracts, but we're confident that they're a consistent representation of the conditions that are occurring in neighborhoods. And as I always say, if you want to fight me about how we are naming our CSAs or how we've classified your neighborhood, my inbox is always open to those conversations, and I love having them. All right, we're on to vital signs, and we're on to sort of the meat of what we're going to be talking through today, which is vital signs 24. So we have updated the data on our website, and that's updated in a few forms. We have a report that's a story map that goes through each particular topic area. Each chapter is a topic area. We have our interactive website that has our data tools where you can look up particular communities by topic area or by indicator. And then we also have our open data portal and maps. So there's a lot of tools that we make available for you to use our data based on your needs. And uh, they are all sort of fully downloadable. So if you need to work with this data for in your job or in your advocacy, it's available to you and it's free to access. There are over 110 indicators from 50 sources that we create each year, and we have 8 topic areas in the report. The first is census demographics, housing and community development, children and family health and well-being, crime and safety, workforce and economic development, arts and culture, education and youth, and sustainability. This report is sponsored, or comes from support from the Annie E. Casey Foundation and also the T. Rowe Price Foundation, who basically support the staff time it takes to make this whole report happen. So, what's new this year? We don't have any new indicators. However, last year we published for the first time in over a decade the Economic Diversity Index. And I wanted to just highlight this particular indicator again because I think it's really cool. We had some requests from city agencies and elected officials that they really wanted a better picture of what's going on economically in Baltimore City. How is our city divided or coming together along economic lines? So, what the Economic Diversity Index functionally does is it measures the chance of choosing 2 people at random in a community, um, and each being of a different income level. The sort of back end is we break down the CSA by income levels. We do it, I think it's quartiles, and then we look at the sort of relative uh, the relative distribution of folks of different incomes within those communities, and that's what creates the index. Um, and I just love this map because I think it's a different trend than we're used to seeing in Baltimore City. I think it shows that we have high areas we have a lot of economic diversity in our city. The sort of dark blues that you're seeing on the map, those are the areas that are really have a lot of people of different incomes living together. And the lighter greens are ones where there's less economic diversity in them. But I just think that this is a map that sort of shows another texture to Baltimore and shows the ways that our communities are actually fairly economically integrated. And the index itself, if you notice, the sort of scale is fairly constrained there. It only goes from 79.8 to 58.1 on the lowest. So we're still seeing economic diversity in areas even where it's somewhat stratified. So I just think that's a really fun indicator and a different sort of picture of Baltimore City. Now, the nerdy thing that's new this year is that all of us at the BNIA office were really, really excited about the American Community Survey release this year. Now, a good portion of the indicators that BNIA produces are from the American Community Survey, which is a product produced by the U.S. Census Bureau. This gives us really robust data on sort of socio-economic characteristics of communities. How long does it take for people to get to work? Um, uh, what mode of transportation do they take to work? It also provides sort of regular estimates of how many people are living in particular communities. Why we were so excited about the 5-year estimates this year, it's the first estimate we have that's 2020 onwards. So it only captures survey data post-pandemic and post-decennial census. And for the past few years, if this is not your first State of the Neighborhoods presentation, we've been seeing some weird issues pop up in the American Community Survey. And we really had this question of are those issues, are they related to the pandemic? Are they related to the sort of truncated nature of the last decennial census? And we were just excited to see what does the data look like when it just is 2020 onwards. And the sort of short of it is we still continue to see some of the issues that we've been seeing in the American Community Survey. And in particular, this relates to population estimates related to the number of children in census tracts. It's not all census tracts where this is an issue, but approximately 25% of census tracts in Baltimore City show populations of 0 or just a handful of children. I'm going to show you what that actually looks like in a few slides. But it's enough now that if you're using census data or if you are trying to understand populations, particularly around children or children living in poverty or any indicator that I think combines two measures at the tract level, I think that there's some caution that you should bring to your analysis. And functionally, the advice I would give is to pull that 2019 data in addition to 24 estimates, just so you get a comparison of the difference between the two. I think that's sort of the easiest path moving forward and will give you a better sense of what's actually going on in the data and where some of those errors might be. We're happy to walk you through how to do that, how to pull data at the census tract level. We can do that one-on-one. But just a heads up, if you're working with this tract level data frequently and you're trying to understand small scale geographies, there's some weirdness that goes on related to population estimates. And that showed up for us this year in the Children and Family Health chapter. And so now we're moving into the sort of topic areas. And we want to say first, we are thrilled that we get to bring the Children and Family Health chapter back. This is the first time in I think it's about 5 years since we've been able to put out this chapter due to data availability. We're still missing a few indicators. However, we felt we are more than 50% of the way there, so we felt comfortable releasing the chapter this year. However, we had to change some calculation methodology due to the challenge I just mentioned on the uh, previous slide. So in previous iterations of vital signs, we calculated a teen birth rate, and that measured the total population of births to teen mothers and was normalized by a female population aged 15 to 19 from the American Community Survey. So what we're finding is that that particular population estimate is really inaccurate in some census tracts. And we now calculate teen births as a share of all births to promote stability of this particular indicator. Um, so what that actually looks like, just so everyone is on the same page, this is a table, and in 2018, Northwood had an estimated population of females aged 15 to 19 of around 1,000. In the 2023 estimates, that was zero. They just said there are no females aged 15 to 19 living in Northwood. Same thing with Loch Raven, Greater Rosemont, Southwest Baltimore, Sandtown, Winchester, Harlem Park. That's, and this is what this sort of error and inconsistency actually looks like in the census data and was why we had to update the indicator itself. Um, and this pops up with particularly with younger children is where we are seeing the challenge there. And so one question that we've had, particularly as it relates to children and these population estimates, is, you know, are people having kids in Baltimore? Is what we're seeing in the census data correct? Is it just that there aren't kids anymore in Baltimore? Now we know that that isn't true. We know that there are plenty of babies around. However, we haven't had data from the state health department in 5 years to really understand what might be going on. So, in general, this is total births in Baltimore City 2014 to 2024. Um, and so what we are seeing is like national trends, there is a decline in births in Baltimore City. However, since about 2021, there's some stability in the lower amount. We're between the sort of low 7,000s to low 7,200s. That seems to be where the birth rate is at this point in time. And we just got the 2024 data earlier this week. Vital Signs this year reports on the 2023 data. However, we did a bit of a preview on the 2024 data for this particular presentation, and we will update our data tools on the website within the coming months so that you all have access to that 2024 data. Another thing that we look at within the children and family health chapter itself is 911 calls for overdoses. Um, and I think in general, there's some really positive trends here. We see a decline citywide from a rate of 9.3 to 7.8 per 1,000 residents. And generally, we're seeing declines in CSAs that typically have high rates of those calls. So this particular chart that's on the slide here, you can see that Baltimore City is at the bottom and you have that sort of downward trend in 2024. But we're seeing that in Upton Druid Heights, a downward trend. We're seeing a downward trend in downtown Seton Hill and Pigtown Carroll Park. A slight uptick in Penn North Res Hill, but in general, we feel like this is an indicator that's trending in the right direction there. And then also we have this sort of preview of the sort of overall birth data that we got from the health department. And we've been looking at the suite of data that we just got, which is 2020 to 2024. That's updating some indicators we haven't been able to populate in a while. And in general, outcomes up until 2023 were looking really positive. We were sort of seeing an upswing in Births delivered to term, births with a satisfactory birth rate, and declines in births to teenage mothers. However, between
Baltimore.
2023 and 2024, we began to see some declines in this measure. So we saw a decrease in delivered at term, a decrease in satisfactory birth weight rate, and an increase of births to teenage mothers, and a decline in early prenatal care. So these are indicators where I think we're going to really have to watch in 2025 as to what are the impacts there are. Do we sort of see a rise back to those 2020 to 2023 levels, or is 2024 the kind of start of some slow downward trajectories? Um, I will also say this is an area where there are strong disparities that persist in the data, particularly with early prenatal care. Um, for instance, Canton, which has the most number percent of mothers receiving prenatal care at 90.3%, where it compared to Brooklyn Curtis Bay, only 34.4% of mothers are receiving early prenatal care. Early prenatal care is described as care that comes in the first trimester of pregnancy. Another trend that we did not put on the slide, though I do think is worth mentioning, the CSAs that have the lowest percentage of early prenatal care, many of them are ones where we're also observing changes in the ethnic population of communities. We're seeing a growing Latino population in these areas, suggesting that some of these disparities in early prenatal care might be due to might be related to particular communities. So I think it's worth flagging, particularly in this political moment, where areas where women and mothers might not be getting the care that they need for a variety of reasons. Moving on to the crime and safety chapter, I think 2023 is where we really start to see the progress, and 2024 is where we really start to see the progress that we're living today, right? Baltimore is experiencing historic lows in crime, and that's exciting. There's a lot of momentum, and there's a lot of really good programs going on that are getting crime down across multiple areas. Part one crime declined or stayed the same in all but 5 CSAs between 2023 and 2024. The violent crime rate decreased from 18.5 to 17.3 incidents per 1,000 people, and gun violence fell to its lowest rate in over a decade. Um, Property crime is higher than pandemic era lows, but below all years between 2012 and 2019. So when we look longitudinally, these declines are still really impressive. And I think, now that we're in 2026, we're seeing that there's some sustainability to this, which is thrilling. Um, this slide doesn't show crime rates, so to speak, but it does show the calls, rate of calls for 911 shootings. And 911 calls are a really good indicator because they describe engagement in city services and sort of willingness of residents to report crimes. It also includes reports that are called in by police officers, but I like pulling in the call data because I think it shows um, sort of the quality of life improvements. It shows sort of how people are interacting with their services and their environment, and that it helps to sort of put the crime drops into context. Moving on into education, there's definitely the sort of big topic of conversation in education right now is continued high rates of chronic absenteeism. And data shows that there's incremental progress related to this particular topic area. between the 2022 and 2023 and 2023 and 2024 school years. There were declines in elementary, middle, and high school. These are small declines. However, I think it shows that progress is trending in the right way. Um, Unfortunately, these rates do exceed pre-pandemic baselines for this measure, so there's still work to be done. But if we're looking sort of longitudinally, I think it's really important to note that chronic absenteeism was increasing pre-pandemic as well. 2020 is here, but we're seeing this kind of upward trajectory a little bit in 20. There's a bit of a dip in 2016, and then this rise in 2017 for high schoolers, and then we sort of see it trending upwards at the elementary and middle school level. So while the pandemic was obviously a large factor in chronic absenteeism and drove up rates, there were some preceding factors that are probably a part of this conversation as well. In housing, I think trends in Baltimore are mirroring a national picture around affordability. Between 2023 and 2024, fewer homeowners are paying more than 30% of their income on housing related expenses, while more renters are paying greater than 30% of their income on housing related expenses. Um, so good for owners, not so good for renters. We're also seeing a sort of slowdown of the market driven by higher interest rates in this period. And one of the ways that that showed is just an increase of days on the market from 16 to 21 days. I think some CSAs that are really worth kind of pulling out and digging into a little more are Southwest Baltimore and Greater Rosemont. Um, Both of these communities experience some of the highest number of homes sold, but also some of the lowest median sales prices between the two of them. Southwest Baltimore also had the second highest percentage of cash-based home sales. 71.1% of all home sales were cash-based. And these trends, to me at least, suggest a degree of speculative market activity that's going on in these two neighborhoods. Turning back very quickly to that affordability question, this is the change in rental affordability between 2019 and 2024 um, for renters. So there are more people, those sort of green areas on the map, those are places where people are paying more than where there's been a change of more than 26.7 points of a growing population of folks who are unable, whose rents are becoming unaffordable. What stands out to me about this particular map is it seems very neighborhood specific, that there are clearly areas that are getting more unaffordable for folks, but they are also surrounded by places where the rate has not changed as much, or in fact, perhaps there's been some decline in the number of folks who are paying more than 30% of their income on a mortgage. So an area that I think is worth diving into, particularly for our housing folks on the call, that there's likely some neighborhood trends going on here that um, might warrant a deeper look. And then finally, we're going to go to arts and culture today to end it out. And we track a number of indicators related to arts and culture, but some of our most interesting are indicators for arts-related businesses and employment and the creative economy. So arts-related businesses, those are industries that allow for the consumption and enjoyment of arts and culture, while creative economy businesses and employment, those are industries that use and support artistic and cultural skill sets. And I would say what we see in the 2024 data is a divergence between those two economies. So the chart that's up on the screen right now, this shows that between 20 that more recently, arts related businesses stayed about the same between 2023 and 2024. That's what that black line is up there. Um, However, we're seeing some rises in Penn North, sort of writ large. However, the sort of arts related economy took a dive post 2020 and has sort of leveled off. Um, Another sort of, since we're looking longitudinally at many of our indicators today, I think it's worth noting that again, this is a decline that preceded the pandemic here in 2018 is where you really start to see that decline in arts related businesses um, and employment. Um, and what's important to note here is that the places that we sort of consider neighborhoods where arts and culture businesses are happening, downtown Seton Hill, Midtown, Fells Point, the sort of hearts of our artistic communities, they've experienced the biggest declines here. Um, and they've also seen large declines in the number of employed persons. The number peaked in 2018 at around 4,500, and currently in 2024, the employment's at about 2,200 persons. So a really significant drop in overall artistic employment in the city since 2018. Now, when we look at the rate of creative economy businesses, that's we're actually beginning to see a little bit of uptake. So 2014 was the first year since the pandemic where Baltimore experienced an increase in the rate of businesses in the creative economy. Um, and so the number of people employed rose 24.7% between 2023 and 2024. So that's huge. That's really good news. Um, so we're seeing both an increase in the rate and an increase in the number of people employed. Um, However, these rates are still below sort of peak levels, which took place in 2013. Neighborhoods like Greater Roland Park, Oliver Johnson Square, and Upton Druid Heights, those they experienced the largest increases since 2019. However, the sort of arts areas, downtown, Midtown, and Fells Point experienced the largest declines between negative 1.8 and negative 8.5. Um, Again, we're seeing a large increase in employment in these areas, with Penn North seeing the largest increase since 2019 and Fells Point seeing the largest decline there. What I think's why I'm highlighting arts and culture right now and at the end of this presentation is that I think there are a lot of conversations right now going on about the places where arts and culture happens in Baltimore City. We're seeing events like Artscape change where they're located. We're seeing sort of declines in the arts writ large. And I think there's a story to be told that the arts have been under real pressure in Baltimore, at least since 2018, if not a bit before that. And the communities that we most associate with artistic production and culture and the things that we love about a city, they're struggling. They're struggling economically, and are deserving, I think, of investment and creative approaches so that we can sort of renew the economy there. The signs that we're seeing, the uptick in the creative economy, they are great. But that doesn't mean that neighborhoods where that once supported really fantastic work and industries are not also hurting. And I think we need to keep those communities kind of at the center of any conversations about what arts and what culture looks like in Baltimore City. So we are close to me wrapping up and moving into Q&A. I think one of the note that I want to end on is that Vital Signs, it's a longitudinal project. And one of the challenges in that work is really trying to understand what the baseline is. What are we measuring from? So many of our conversations since I've started in this role have been about how do we measure recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic? And that's a really important question. However, what I wanted to sort of show today is that many of the trends that we're talking about right now, they started before the pandemic. And I think some of the solutions that are going to come out have to sort of go back even further. We really have to look and see what was happening in 2016, what was happening in 2018 that sort of drove these downward trends that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So trying to keep that sort of longitudinal picture in however we are planning to move forward. Um, and then looking ahead, we next year's the release of Vital Signs 25. I'm really excited about what the next year is going to have in store. I think the 25th anniversary offers a time to reflect and to think critically about the power of longitudinal indicator projects, and also to assess how our work can best support Baltimore and its residents moving forward. Um, we want to know what data is working for folks and what isn't, and where we need to improve, or where data collection needs to happen, or or where there needs to be an expansion of just data collection in general. So if you have ideas about the 25th anniversary, or if you think that there are ways that BNIA can be rethinking our indicator project, or bringing in new sources, or anything, we really want to hear from you. This is a time where we want to be reflective and also plan for the future. Um, and I also think this is a doubly important question um, to pose or to think through right now, because we have federal quality challenges with the ACS, with the census, but we are also just sort of drowning in a slew of unverified and untrustworthy output data from generative models. And we need to find ways where we can confidently sort fact from fiction and understand what data really matters to communities the most. And we're hoping to be central to those conversations. So again, if you have ideas, or something sparks your interest here, reach out. We want to hear from you. And then finally, I just want to give you a quick update on some of the things that BNIA has in the ether right now. We released our first round of reports, of evaluation reports from the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. Those include an interim report on Live Baltimore's Buy Back the Block evaluation, and an evaluation of MONSE's coordinated neighborhood stabilization responses, and an interim report on SOS Fund and Parity Baltimore's work. The final evaluation for Buy Back the Block, we anticipate it coming out in the next few weeks, and we are happy to provide briefings or presentations on these reports upon request. We've also begun to offer data capacity services, helping cities and organizations work through their program data, figure out best practices for measuring change, and sort of thinking through how do you match data with strategy. So if any of those things are interesting to you, our doors are open. And finally, we also offer pro bono data and technical services for Baltimore nonprofit organizations. If you have a quick data question or you need a map, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help. Um, and on that note, it's time for the Q&A. And I'm going to take a sip of water while questions come through.